Let's talk about motion inputs. A lot of the newer fighting games that are coming out are leaning away from the motion input model of executing special moves and leaning more towards simple inputs. If this is news to you, you obviously weren't around the previous week, but let me give you a rundown of what's happening. Currently, there are two popular ways of executing special moves in fighting games. Motion inputs require you to do a motion with your movement commands. The most common one is the quarter circle, so you will do down, down, forward, forward, and then press a button in order to get a special move. There's a bunch of different motion inputs, and they've been around in fighting games for a very long time. Simple inputs are, as the name implies, simple versions of inputs. Normally this is forcing a button to be a special move button, and then you can press a direction and a special move in order to get the input. Fighting games have been flirting with simple inputs for a while now. Games like Grand Blue Fantasy Versus have control schemes that allow for both at the same time. Street Fighter 6 has an entire mode that allows you to use simple inputs over motion inputs. The momentum of simple inputs has been rising and rising over the past couple of years. And it's finally got to the point where some older players are getting sick of it. Don't get me wrong, there are players who really dislike motion inputs, but from the loud response I've seen, a lot of players of current fighting games at least really like their motion inputs. But developers don't seem to be listening. In fact, simple inputs are becoming more and more common. 4 tag games are set to come out within the next year. 3 of these were announced to have simple inputs only: Hunter x Hunter Net Impact, 2XKO, and Invincible Versus. Marvel Tokon was the only game that was announced to have motion inputs, and even then they said it would have a mode which allows you to do simple inputs. So the consensus is pretty clear. Developers believe that getting rid of motion inputs are going to make fighting games more accessible, which leads to a couple of questions, but the one that I'm really interested in is why? Now, there are a couple of very obvious examples to that, accessibility being one of them. Some people with neurological and motor function diseases aren't able to control the games very well. Trying to do a quarter circle doesn't work with their brain or with their hands. So having simple inputs allows them to play the game in a way that other players are able to. I can't demonize that. That's completely fair. The ones that I do have a problem though are the people who say that the controls feel janky. There was a video that went around ages ago that has now been deleted because the FGC did FGC things, of someone talking about how they didn't like motion inputs, saying they were archaic design and a relic of the past that should be gotten rid of. And I feel like he's going to be very happy at the current state of things. But if you talk to anyone who does motion inputs pretty regularly, or anyone who's even really done them before, at some point they stop being a factor in your brain. I play fighting games basically every day, and the games I play require you to do motion inputs. You have no option to not do them. So I'm used to the feeling of them, and I can generally execute them 99% of the time. Unless it's in a really tight situation, in which case, hey, sometimes you drop it. So for me, someone who's played these games for hours and hours and hours and gotten used to the motions is not something that I think about. But do you know what game makes me think of the core things that I'm doing? What game I played that makes me feel like the fundamental act of doing a thing is hard and unintuitive? It's a little-known game. I'm not sure if you've ever played it. I'm not sure if you've ever even looked at it. You ever heard of Counter-Strike? Counter-Strike is a 5v5 shooter game in which you try to either plant a bomb in an area or defuse a bomb in order to win a round. You play as either the Ts or CTs, Ts being the attackers and CTs being the defenders. It is the grandfather of the tac shooter genre, and if you know anything about tac shooters, you know that they love their jank. Now, you've probably seen a shooter before, so you think you know how this works. I press left click, my crosshair is on the guy's head, and the bullet goes cleanly through his skull. Wrong! You see, your gun doesn't actually shoot straight. If you hold down the fire trigger, your gun actually recoils to create a specific pattern. This is called the gun spray, and each gun has a unique spray pattern. If you want to shoot reliably while holding down the trigger, you have to learn the spray pattern of your gun and adjust around it. But that's not the reason why I missed in this clip. The reason why I wasn't able to hit this guy is because when you move, there is a randomness added to your bullet spread. Meaning that if you want to hit your opponent, you have to plant your feet and stop moving. To get a 100% accurate shot with the AK-47, you need to not be moving at all, and only the first bullet that comes out of the gun will not be affected by spray pattern or movement deviation. And when you're doing this for the first time, you're playing in a deathmatch, and you're trying to shoot someone, it feels like shit. If you're used to other shooters, which, let's be real, you probably are, having added mechanics on the basic things you do, like shooting your gun, does not feel good, especially when you're used to your bullet just going exactly where your crosshair is. But for people who like CS, this is a good thing. It is a hurdle that they have had to overcome, and after a while, they kind of just stop thinking about it. Watch any pro CS player, and when they strafe a corner, they'll immediately counter-strafe to nullify their momentum to get a 100% perfect shot. And this is a thing that those players really like doing. But as a newbie, it is something you have to learn before you can get to the interesting part of the games. And that's just to shoot. To play Counter-Strike properly, you need to know your default spots. What all your utility does, how the different meta sight lines to avoid, how to retake a site, Russian, and most of these things change every time you play a new map. Yeah, Counter-Strike is one of the hardest games I've ever tried to get into, to the point where I bounced off of it multiple times. So you would think, with a game that is as awkward to play initially as this, with such a high learning curve, that there would be no one playing it, right? Well, I mean, you already knew it was Counter-Strike. Of course it's going to have big numbers. Counter-Strike has kept its depth for the majority of its lifetime, only having small changes with each iteration. And even then, a lot of people still play 1.6. But over time, fighting games have had their complexities slowly taken away. So why is that? Why is this allowed to exist in the state that it is, but fighting games have to constantly evolve? Well, when you go into Counter-Strike, you have a base level of understanding. You've probably played a shooter, right? Back in the mid-2000s, early 2010s, mid-2010s even, shooters were absolutely massive. They were everywhere and they were super hard to avoid. Even nowadays, there are a bunch of different shooters to choose from. It's an extremely healthy genre. You know, when you play a shooter on PC, WASD moves you around, mouse looks around with a camera, and left click fires. This is unanimous across basically all shooter games. Fighting games, though, don't have a distinct parallel to draw from. Well, they did, but they don't really anymore. When was the last time you played a beat-em-up? Beat-em-ups were extremely popular in the mid-90s when arcades and fighting games were booming. Nowadays, though, the beat-em-up genre just isn't what it used to be. There's still people making games in the genre, shout out the new Scott Pilgrim game, but it's nowhere near as big as it was when the arcades were still around. But when they were bigger, you were able to draw the experience you got from playing beat-em-ups and apply them, at least a little bit, to fighting games, since the control schemes were extremely similar. They just had added complexities on top of them. Now, though, most people don't have that base knowledge of how the character moves, how the character functions. If you play a fighting game, the likelihood is you're going to be drawing experience from other fighting games or nothing. It's the reason why people like Smash Bros. So much. It draws its inspiration from platformers. Platformers are still around and extremely healthy. So when people first get into fighting games, I use that loosely now, they gravitate towards Smash because it's something they know, it's something they understand, and it feels natural to them, compared to Mr. Street Fighter over here. So how do you solve this issue? Well, it's kind of a hard one, and there's not really a good answer to it. Thankfully, fighting games aren't alone on this one, and we can see parallels of the simple input method being used in other games. Mainly League of Legends. If you don't know, MOBAs evolved from the real-time strategy genre. But real-time strategy games don't really exist anymore. So a lot of new players getting into these games don't have the understanding of how RTSs work fundamentally. So the control schemes are completely new to them, and it feels like shit. So Riot are adding a new control method that mimics more, let's go, Hades input styles? Isometric top-down movement stuff, you know the ones. They're literally calling it the modern control scheme. I wonder where we've heard this one before. It's a hard thing to get around, and a lot of developers are deciding that changing their input methods to be simpler and easier to understand is the way to do it. So does that mean that motion inputs are destined to disappear forever? No, I don't think they are. The fact of the matter is, there is a large enough audience that still likes doing them. So they're probably going to stay around at least for the foreseeable future. But that doesn't mean that fighting games are off the hook. With the beat-em-up genre being less popular than fighting games now, developers are going to need to find ways going forward to get their players accustomed to the basics of their games. Some devs have started doing this, mainly Capcom with their World Tour mode. And while it is a good start, I think there's more that they can be doing to get people accustomed to their controls. People can do anything if they set their mind to it, even if it seems impossible. A quarter circle is a simple motion input, and with the correct tools and conditions, anyone can do it. You just gotta show them how to. Thanks for watching. I had to rewrite the script 4 times and decided to say fuck it and just speak from the heart. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all later. Bye-bye. As always, a very special thanks to 64 MHz, Akechi Crow, Almost Naptime, Angel S, Axel of the Syndicate, Bocchi the Rock FGC, Daniel Wiedericht, Edison Luttrell, Fexo, Games.png, have fun pronouncing Asmiranda Mardica Destin Kuldakar. I am Nauta, It's Riley, Criticat, Beige Paladin, MP04, Hoffmeister Bear, Ray W, Sergeant Cubby, Shorty Ree, Slimy Gal 42, Super, Forcon, and Velvet Poppy for being Tier 2 patron supporters.